Let's talk about something that sounds ordinary, almost boring, yet sits underneath nearly everything physics says, the idea of a state. A state sounds like a condition, a description of how something is right now. But in physics, it carries a precise meaning. A state is the full physical situation of a system, written in the smallest amount of information needed to determine what can happen next. Physics has a strict rule here. It does not care about how a system arrived where it is. It only cares about how it is right now. If two situations are physically identical at this moment, physics treats them as the same, even if their histories were wildly different. A short example makes this concrete. Think about a cup of coffee on a table. To predict what happens next, physics does not need to know who brewed it, what cafe it came from, or how tired you are. What matters is whether it is hot or cold, how much coffee is there, and the surrounding room temperature. If two cups match in those properties, physics predicts the same cooling behavior for both. The story behind them disappears. Only the present description remains. That present description is the state. This idea reaches far beyond coffee. A moving ball, a gas in a room, a planet in orbit, all of them are treated the same way. Physics asks a single question: what information is required to fix the future behavior? Everything else is ignored, not out of laziness, but because it has no physical effect. This is where people often hesitate. It feels like something must be missing. Surely reality carries more detail than a short list of numbers. Yet experiments keep agreeing with physics. If a detail cannot influence what happens next, it does not belong in the state. A state is not a photograph. It is a working summary. It contains exactly what the laws of nature can act on, and nothing more. That makes states powerful and also a little unsettling. It means the universe carries itself forward moment by moment without consulting its past, except through what the current state already holds. Everything that can happen next depends on what fits into that description, and nothing else. So let's slow this down and take it apart carefully, because this is where the word state stops sounding ordinary and turns into something precise. At the most basic working level, a state is the complete physical condition of a system, expressed in a form that allows the laws of physics to operate without guessing. It is not a picture, not a label, and not a story. It is a set of facts that fully fixes what the system can do next. That word complete is doing real work here. Complete does not mean detailed in a human sense. It does not mean rich, expressive, or emotionally satisfying. It means that if you hand this description to the laws of physics, they do not ask for anything else. No extra information, no missing inputs, no follow-up questions. If some detail can affect what happens next, it belongs in the state. If it cannot, it does not. That rule sounds obvious until you apply it seriously. Return briefly to the coffee. Suppose two cups sit on the same table. One was brewed 5 minutes ago, the other an hour ago. One was stirred clockwise, the other counterclockwise. One came from a cafe, the other from a kitchen. None of that enters the state. If the temperature, the amount of liquid, and the surrounding air are the same, physics predicts the same cooling behavior. The rest feels important to us, but it has no physical leverage. That difference between what feels real and what can influence future behavior is where many people get lost. Physics has learned to be ruthless about it because prediction depends on it. This tells us something crucial about what a state actually is. A state is not how things look. It is how things are positioned relative to the rules. That is a very different notion. It trades rich description for functional sufficiency. This is why states so often look like a short list of numbers, not because reality is simple, but because most details cancel out when it comes to future change. People often expect that more description should always improve prediction. Physics finds the opposite. Extra description often adds noise without adding power. States are minimal on purpose. Now follow the consequences of that idea. Any change you can think of, motion, heating, mixing, decay, growth, can be described as a transition from one state to another. The laws of physics are nothing more than rules that map one state into the next. This reframes the entire structure of physics. Instead of objects being pushed around by laws, you get states being updated by rules. Instead of causes acting on things, you get present conditions fixing future conditions. Take memory. People often speak as if physical systems remember their past. Physics says something stricter. Any trace of the past must be encoded in the current state. If it is not encoded there, it has no effect on what follows. A stretched spring carries information about being stretched because its present shape contains it. A scar carries information about an injury because the tissue structure contains it. A cooled cup of coffee carries no information about how hot it was an hour ago because nothing in its present condition encodes that fact. Memory in physics is not a mysterious faculty. It is information stored in a state. This leads to a result many people resist. The past has no direct influence on the present. Its influence exists only through what survives in the current state. If nothing survives, the past is physically silent. This is not a philosophical preference. It is forced by how prediction works. If two systems share the same state, physics gives them the same future. No experiment has ever contradicted this. Now let's push deeper into what a state is, not just how it behaves. A state is an abstract object. That word often raises eyebrows, but here it means something very specific. The state is not located in space the way the system itself is. The system exists in space. The state exists in the space of possible conditions. Those are different arenas. A ball travels through space. Its state lives in a mathematical space whose coordinates represent position and motion. A gas fills a room. Its state lives in a space defined by quantities like temperature, pressure, and density. The system and its state are related, but they are not the same thing. This distinction becomes important as systems grow large. A gas contains an enormous number of particles, far too many to track individually. Still, it has a state. Physics uses collective quantities because they preserve predictive power. The full microscopic detail exists, but the state that physics actually uses is compressed. This reveals another sharp lesson. A system always has a state, even when no one can write it down. Existence and accessibility are not the same. Weather has a state. We measure parts of it, approximate others, and still get surprises. The laws did not fail. The description was incomplete. This reframes uncertainty in a very concrete way. Uncertainty is not something floating over reality. It is a mismatch between the actual state and the state we are able to specify. Physics never becomes confused. Descriptions do. This also explains why physics places so much emphasis on initial conditions. Laws by themselves do not produce specific outcomes. They only specify how states change. Without a state to act on, laws describe possibilities, not events. People often ask why the laws of physics do not explain everything. The answer is blunt. Laws do not select states. They transform them. The universe does not ask the laws what state to be in. It already is in one. Now bring this picture into modern physics. In quantum mechanics, the state takes a form that resists everyday language. It does not assign definite values to properties like position or motion. Instead, it encodes the full structure of possible outcomes. Yet its role remains unchanged. The quantum state still contains everything physics can say about what follows. Nothing extra can be pulled from it. Nothing less will suffice. This result bothered many brilliant physicists. They suspected hidden layers beneath the formalism. Decades of experiments answered the same way. Predictions match the quantum state exactly, and no hidden layer reveals itself. Once again, physics encountered the same lesson. Reality provides exactly the information it uses, and no surplus. Here, the idea of a state stands out as more than a technical detail. It holds the structure of physics together. The universe advances by carrying forward a compact description of itself. Each moment inherits only what the present state contains. Everything else drops out of physical relevance. This does not make reality thin, it makes it efficient. And now something subtle but powerful comes into view. If the state contains all that can influence what follows, then the question, what exists, quietly transforms into what can affect future change. In physics, existence and influence are inseparable. That single move explains why some things that feel important never appear in equations, while some abstract symbols carry enormous predictive force. Physics follows influence, not impression. State is not jargon at all. It is the mechanism by which nature carries information forward in time. And with that backbone in place, a further tension comes into view, one that appears when the very notion of a single definite state begins to strain under. From here, the idea of a state stands at the center of how physical influence is organized. If influence must pass through the state, then anything that fails to register there cannot affect what follows. This draws a hard boundary around explanation. Physics does not ask what might have played a role. It asks what is encoded right now in a way that constrains the next moment. This changes how cause and effect are treated. Causes are not events reaching forward from the past. They are features of the present state that limit what can happen next. Effects are not produced by history pushing forward. They are produced by rules acting on current conditions. That view clashes with everyday habits of thinking. People tend to place causes in stories about what happened earlier. Physics places them in the present description. This difference is structural, not linguistic. Now look at systems where states react strongly to small differences. In chaotic dynamics, extremely tiny variations in the state lead to wildly different outcomes. Weather illustrates this well. Two atmospheric states that differ by amounts far below any practical measurement can lead to entirely different futures. The rules remain exact. Nothing about the laws breaks. The difficulty lies entirely in the state itself. Here is the striking result. Rule-based evolution survives even when prediction fails. The system follows its laws perfectly, yet foresight collapses because the state cannot be specified with enough precision. Unpredictability in this sense does not signal disorder, it signals sensitivity. This separates two ideas that are often mixed together. Lawfulness describes how states lead to states. Predictability describes whether those transitions can be tracked with the information available. One can hold without the other. Now move to smaller scales. Quantum physics accepts the same framework and then stretches it in a way that defeats familiar expectations. The quantum state does not list properties as fixed facts. It does not supply a definite position or motion ahead of interaction. Instead, it encodes how the system can respond when interaction occurs. This is not vagueness, it is precision of a different kind. The quantum state contains everything that can shape outcomes. It simply refuses to supply values that have no physical role until interaction takes place. This leads to one of the most surprising consequences in physics. The same state can give rise to different outcomes depending on how it is probed. The outcome is not stored in advance. It is selected through interaction. For a long time, many physicists expected a deeper layer that would restore familiar descriptions. Experiments repeatedly blocked that route. Predictions drawn from the quantum state matched reality exactly, and no hidden layer ever showed itself. Here, the meaning of a state sharpens further. It is not a list of attributes. It is a constraint on possible futures. Nothing outside that constraint appears in outcomes. This reworks causation again. There is no side channel through which influence travels beyond the state. No invisible mechanism supplements it. Influence passes forward only through what is encoded at each moment. This also explains why higher-level sciences remain valid without conflict. Chemistry, biology, and neuroscience all describe states, just not microscopic ones. A chemical state summarizes bonding arrangements. A biological state summarizes metabolic activity. A neural state summarizes electrical and chemical activity across networks. Each level tracks influence relevant at its scale. None violate physics because each respects the same rule. Future behavior is limited by present conditions. Reduction does not erase these descriptions, it anchors them. Now a natural puzzle emerges. If states carry everything relevant, and if laws act uniformly, why does the future ever feel open? Why does novelty appear at all? The answer lies in complexity rather than indeterminacy. Even systems governed by strict rules can generate behavior that resists anticipation because the space of possible states is enormous. Rules apply locally, but their repeated action produces outcomes that exceed simple forecasting. Nothing extra is added. What already exists rearranges itself in ways that overwhelm tracking. This explains why surprise persists even in a lawful universe. Surprise reflects limits on access to states, not failures of the rules. At this stage, the idea of a state carries weight beyond calculation. It implies that reality advances by carrying forward exactly what can influence what follows, no more and no less. The universe operates with strict economy. That economy explains both the reach and the restraint of physics. Reach comes from focusing only on influence. Restraint comes from ignoring everything else. The picture that emerges is stark but coherent. Reality is not driven by hidden narratives or accumulated intentions. It proceeds through continuous updates of states under fixed rules. Every moment inherits a complete description of what can shape the next one. Everything else, no matter how compelling, plays no role. This does not strip the world of richness. It explains how richness arises without extra machinery. With this framework in place, one issue stands ahead. Measurement itself must be treated as a physical process, subject to the same rules and the same limits. That issue waits just beyond this point. Measurement brings the framework to completion without adding anything new to the rules. When a system interacts strongly with another system, the two no longer carry separate descriptions. Their physical conditions become linked. From that point onward, there is a single, combined description that governs what can happen next. This is not a special category of event. It is the same kind of update that occurs in every physical process. Measurement does not reveal a pre-written answer. It creates a new situation by coupling systems together. This fact removes a long-standing confusion. There is no divide between natural evolution and observation. Both are physical interactions. Both follow the same laws. Both operate by updating states. With that, the picture closes cleanly. Physics rests on a small set of claims that have survived every test placed against them. Every physical system carries a complete description of its current condition. The laws of physics operate only on that description. What happens next depends only on that description and the laws. Anything not present in that description cannot influence future behavior. These statements are not philosophical positions. They are the conditions required for prediction, explanation, and consistency to function at all. There is also a crucial distinction that keeps reappearing across physics. A system can have a well-defined description even when no one can specify it fully. Limited access restricts forecasting, not the behavior of the system itself. Nature does not wait for complete information in order to proceed. This explains why lawful behavior continues even in situations where outcomes appear surprising or irregular. There are also boundaries worth stating clearly. Physics does not claim that current descriptions of states are final. Classical descriptions were replaced by quantum ones. Future theories may alter the form again. What cannot be removed is the role these descriptions play. They carry all physically relevant influence forward. Physics also does not claim to explain why the laws take their particular form. States describe how change unfolds under given rules. The origin of those rules remains beyond experimental reach. And physics does not require a single, uniform description across all scales. Instead, it supports compatible descriptions at different levels, each tracking influence appropriate to its domain. These limits are not weaknesses. They define where physics is precise and where it remains silent. Now assemble the full view. The universe is not best captured as a collection of objects accumulating properties through time. It is better captured as a continuous progression of physical conditions, each one determining what can follow. Laws act as update rules, transforming one description into the next. Nothing outside that process plays a role. This explains why physics favors compressed descriptions. It explains why distant histories fade while present conditions dominate. It explains why chemistry, biology, and neuroscience coexist without conflict, each using descriptions suited to their scale while remaining physically grounded. It also explains why explanation has sharp limits. Physics can state what follows from what and what cannot follow at all. It does not promise narrative satisfaction. It promises internal consistency. The takeaway is direct. Reality advances by carrying forward only what can influence what comes next. If something shapes the future, it appears in the current description. If it does not appear there, it has no physical effect. That single principle replaces countless informal assumptions with one disciplined framework. The world then reads not as a buildup of past events, but as a continuous handoff, each moment passing forward exactly the information required for the next, and nothing beyond that.
You know what terrifies me? It's not death. It's not failure. It's not even poverty. What terrifies me is waking up at 70 years old and realizing I spent my entire life thinking like everyone else. That I never questioned anything. That I just accepted what I was told, followed the path that was laid out for me, and died without ever really using this incredible machine we call the human mind. Richard Feynman once said something that should shake every single one of us to our core. He said the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Think about that for a second. The person standing between you and greatness, between you and true understanding, between you and an extraordinary life isn't your boss, isn't your circumstances, isn't the economy. It's you. You are fooling yourself right now, in ways you can't even see. I want to talk to you today about why average minds stay average. Not because they lack potential, not because they're stupid, but because they've built a prison of comfort around themselves, and they don't even know they're trapped inside it. And I'm going to tell you how to break free, because once you see the bars of this cage, you can never unsee them. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for Feynman. He was at MIT, supposedly one of the smartest guys in the room, and he was miserable. You know why? Because he realized he was playing a game. He was doing physics to impress people, to publish papers, to get recognition. And one day he saw a student in the cafeteria throwing a plate in the air, and he watched it wobble and spin, and instead of walking past like everyone else, he stopped. He asked himself, why does it wobble like that? What's the relationship between the wobble and the spin? His colleagues thought he was wasting time. Here's this brilliant physicist studying a spinning plate. But Feynman didn't care. He was curious. He worked out the equations. He played with the problem. And you know what? That useless curiosity about a spinning plate eventually led to work that won him the Nobel Prize. Because he wasn't thinking like everyone else. He wasn't following the approved path. He was thinking. And that's the first trap that catches average minds. They stop being curious. They stop asking why. You know when this happens. It happens slowly like a disease. You're born curious. Watch a 3-year-old kid. They ask why about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why do I have to go to bed? They're little scientists, running experiments, testing boundaries, trying to understand how the world works. But then something happens. We send them to school, and school says sit down, be quiet, memorize this. Don't ask questions. There's one right answer and I have it. We train the curiosity out of them. We reward obedience and punish questioning. And by the time they're 18, they've learned the most dangerous lesson of all. Don't rock the boat. Don't challenge authority. Don't think too deeply. Just do what you're told. I'm not saying education is bad. I'm saying we've confused education with indoctrination. Real education liberates your mind. It teaches you how to think, not what to think. But most of what we call education today, it's a factory system designed to produce compliant workers who follow instructions and don't cause trouble. Feynman understood this. When he was asked to evaluate science textbooks for schools in California, he was horrified. He found books that taught kids to read the words, but not understand the concepts. Books that made them memorize definitions without knowing what they meant. He found one textbook that spent pages talking about energy in scientific terms, but when he asked teachers to explain it in simple language, they couldn't. They had memorized jargon without understanding. And that's how average minds operate. They collect words and phrases and ideas like trading cards, but they never actually think about what they mean. They say things like quantum mechanics, or artificial intelligence, or paradigm shift, because they've heard other people say them, but they can't explain them to a 10-year-old. And if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it. That's not me saying that. That's Feynman. The second trap that catches average minds is that they think in words instead of concepts. Let me explain what I mean. Someone asks you, what's gravity? And the average person says, gravity is a force that pulls things down. Okay, but what does that mean? What is a force? What does pulling mean? Why does it pull? They're using words to define other words. But there's no real understanding underneath. Feynman would approach it differently. He'd say, imagine you're in space floating. You and another person, you throw a ball to them. Now imagine you're on Earth and you throw a ball. What's different? Why does the ball come down on Earth but float in space? What's actually happening? He'd build the understanding from the ground up, from things you can see and touch and feel, not from abstract definitions. Most people never think this deeply because it's hard. It's uncomfortable. It's easier to just memorize the definition and move on. But that's the difference between knowing something and understanding something. And average minds settle for knowing. They collect information like Pokemon cards and think that makes them smart. I want you to think about your own life right now. How many things do you know that you don't actually understand? How many opinions do you hold that you've never really examined? How many beliefs do you have just because someone told you they were true? If you're honest with yourself, the answer is probably terrifying. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. Feynman was once in a hotel room in Brazil, and there was a big problem. Someone's safe had been left locked, and they couldn't remember the combination. The management was panicking. They were going to have to drill it open. It was going to be expensive. Feynman said, "Let me try." Everyone laughed. What does a physicist know about cracking safes? But Feynman understood something they didn't. He understood that people are predictable. He knew that most people pick combinations based on patterns, based on dates, based on things that are meaningful to them. He tried a few obvious things: birth dates, the hotel room number. Nothing worked. Then he realized something: the safe was owned by a physicist. A physicist might use a mathematical constant. He tried the first digits of pi. Click. The safe opened. Everyone thought it was magic. But it wasn't magic, it was thinking. It was understanding how people work, how systems work, how the world works. Average minds would have just called a locksmith and paid the bill. Feynman thought about the problem differently, and that made all the difference. The third trap that catches average minds is that they're terrified of being wrong. They need to be right all the time. They need to look smart. They need everyone to think they know what they're talking about. And this fear of being wrong is absolutely lethal to learning and growth. Feynman loved being wrong. He loved it when someone proved him wrong, because it meant he was about to learn something. He would change his mind in the middle of a sentence if someone showed him better evidence. He had no ego about his ideas. He cared about the truth, not about being right. Most people are the opposite. They'll defend their beliefs to the death, even when all the evidence says they're wrong, because they've tied their identity to those beliefs. To admit they're wrong feels like admitting they're stupid. So they dig in, they rationalize, they find excuses, they attack the messenger. Anything but actually change their mind. I see this all the time. Someone believes something for years. Then new information comes along that contradicts it. And instead of being excited to update their understanding, they get defensive. They say things like, well, that's just your opinion, or you can find studies that say anything, or I've always believed this and I'm not changing now. And in that moment, they've chosen comfort over truth. They've chosen ego over growth. They've chosen to stay average. Let me tell you about one of the most important moments in Feynman's career. He was working on the Manhattan Project, helping to build the atomic bomb. Brilliant physicists from all over the world all working together. And Feynman noticed something. Even these geniuses, these Nobel Prize winners, they would get attached to their ideas. They'd have a theory about how something worked, and when experiments showed they were wrong, they'd get upset. But not Feynman. When his ideas were proven wrong, he'd throw them away immediately and start over. No attachment, no ego, just curiosity about what was actually true. And this made him incredibly valuable to the project because he could adapt faster than anyone else. He could see solutions others missed because he wasn't blinded by the need to be right. Think about your own life. How much energy do you waste defending positions you don't even care about that much? Just because you said them out loud once and now your ego won't let you back down. How many arguments have you had where you knew halfway through that you were wrong, but you kept arguing anyway because you didn't want to lose face? That's the ego trap, and it keeps you average. The fourth trap, and this one is huge, is that average minds confuse credentials with competence. They think a degree means understanding. They think a title means wisdom. They think if someone is famous or successful, they must be right about everything. Feynman hated this. He once served on a presidential commission investigating the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. NASA executives kept giving him fancy presentations with charts and graphs, trying to impress him with their credentials and authority. But Feynman didn't care about any of that. He asked simple questions. What happens to the O rings in cold weather? Show me the data. Let's do a simple experiment. And you know what he did? In the middle of a televised hearing, he took a piece of the O ring material, dropped it in ice water, and showed everyone watching that it became brittle and lost its flexibility. It was a middle school science experiment, but it cut through all the bureaucratic nonsense and showed exactly why the shuttle had exploded. The experts, with all their credentials, had complicated something simple, and Feynman simplified something complicated. This happens everywhere, in business, in medicine, in education, in government. People hide behind fancy language and credentials and titles because they don't actually understand what they're talking about. And average minds are intimidated by this. They assume if someone talks over their head, that person must be smart. But often, it's the opposite. The person who can't explain something simply doesn't understand it well enough. I want you to start questioning credentials. I want you to start asking, does this person actually know what they're talking about, or are they just good at sounding impressive? Can they explain this to me in simple terms, or do they need jargon to hide behind? This doesn't mean experts aren't valuable. It means you should be able to tell the difference between a real expert and someone playing dress up. Here's the fifth trap, and it's probably the biggest one. Average minds live in their comfort zone. They find something that works, something that's safe, something that pays the bills and doesn't challenge them too much, and they just stay there for 40 years. They stop growing, they stop learning, they coast. Feynman never coasted. Even after winning the Nobel Prize, even after becoming world famous, he kept learning new things. He learned to play the bongos. He learned to draw. He learned to crack safes. He learned Mayan hieroglyphics. He spent time in Brazil learning Portuguese and teaching physics. He was constantly pushing himself into areas where he was a beginner, where he didn't know what he was doing, where he might look foolish. Why? Because he understood that comfort is the enemy of growth. When you're comfortable, you're not learning. You're just repeating what you already know. And repetition without growth is death. It's slow death, but it's death nonetheless. Most people hit 30, 5 or 40, and they've basically stopped learning anything meaningful. They've got their routines, their habits, their established ways of doing things, and they just run those same programs over and over until they retire. And then they wonder why life feels empty, why they feel disconnected, why they feel like something is missing. What's missing is growth. What's missing is challenge. What's missing is the feeling of struggling with something difficult and then mastering it. That feeling is what makes you feel alive. And average minds trade it away for comfort and security. I'm going to tell you something that might upset you. Your comfort zone is killing you. Not physically, but spiritually, intellectually, emotionally. Every day you spend doing only things you're already good at, only things that feel easy and safe, is a day your mind gets softer, weaker, less capable. It's like physical fitness. If you never challenge your muscles, they atrophy. Same with your brain. Feynman understood this deeply. He had this amazing ability to make complicated things simple, but he also had the courage to tackle things that made him feel stupid. And feeling stupid is essential to learning. If you never feel confused, if you never feel lost, if you never feel like you don't understand something, it means you're not learning anything new. You're just reinforcing what you already know. There's this beautiful story about Feynman in painting. He was friends with an artist, and one day the artist said to him, "You scientists don't really see the beauty of things. You reduce everything to formulas and equations, and you miss the real beauty." Feynman disagreed completely. He said, "When I look at a flower, I see what you see. I see the colors, the petals, the beauty, but I also see the processes that made it. I see the evolution that created this shape because it helps with pollination. I see the chemistry that creates the colors. I see the physics of how light reflects off it. My understanding doesn't diminish the beauty, it adds to it. That's what learning does. It doesn't take away from life, it adds layers of meaning and appreciation. But most people don't see it that way. They see learning as a chore, as something you do in school because you have to, not as something that enriches your entire existence. The sixth trap is that average minds outsource their thinking. They let other people tell them what to think about everything. They watch the news and let news anchors tell them what's important. They scroll social media and let algorithms decide what they should care about. They listen to podcasts and adopt other people's opinions wholesale without ever actually thinking through the issues themselves. This is incredibly dangerous. When you outsource your thinking, you outsource your agency. You become a puppet dancing to strings you can't even see. And the scary part is most people don't even realize they're doing it. They think their opinions are their own, but really they're just a collection of things they've heard from various sources, assembled into something that feels like a worldview, but is really just a college of other people's ideas. Feynman was viciously independent in his thinking. He didn't care what other physicists thought. He didn't care what was fashionable or popular. He worked through every problem himself, from first principles. Sometimes he'd arrive at the same answer as everyone else, but he got there his own way. And sometimes he'd find a completely different approach that no one had thought of. This is what you need to do. Stop asking, "What do people think about this?" And start asking, "What do I think about this?" Stop looking for the approved answer and start working out your own answer. It's okay if you arrive at the same conclusion as everyone else, as long as you got there through your own reasoning. Let me give you a practical example. Someone tells you, you need to invest in real estate because it always goes up. Average mind says, okay, sounds good. Everyone says that must be true. Better mind says, wait, always? Really? What about 2008? What about Japan in the 1990s? What determines real estate prices? Under what conditions do they go up? Under what conditions do they go down? What does invest even mean in this context? See the difference. One person is accepting information, the other person is thinking, and thinking is hard. It takes energy. It takes time. Most people are too lazy or too tired to do it, so they just accept whatever sounds plausible and move on. But here's what's interesting. The more you practice thinking for yourself, the easier it gets. It becomes a habit. You start automatically questioning things, examining assumptions, looking for flaws in reasoning. And this habit transforms your entire life because you stop being a passive recipient of information and become an active participant in creating your understanding of reality. The seventh trap is that average minds seek certainty when they should embrace uncertainty. They want clear answers, simple rules, black and white definitions. They're uncomfortable with, I don't know, or it's complicated, or the evidence is mixed. They want someone to just tell them what's true so they can file it away and not think about it anymore. But reality doesn't work like that. Reality is messy and complicated and uncertain. And the people who can sit with that uncertainty, who can be comfortable saying, I don't know yet, or the evidence suggests X, but I could be wrong, those are the people who can actually navigate reality effectively. Feynman had this incredible tolerance for uncertainty. He would say things like, I think this is probably true based on current evidence, but I could be completely wrong and I'm excited to find out. He held his beliefs lightly, always ready to update them. He understood that certainty is usually an illusion, and the people who are most certain are often the most wrong. Think about the people in your life who are absolutely certain about everything. Certain about politics, certain about religion, certain about how the world works, certain about what you should do with your life. Are these people usually right, or are they just confident? There's a huge difference. I've found that the smartest people I know are the ones who say, I don't know, most often. They're comfortable with uncertainty because they understand that the world is complex. The dumbest people I know are the ones who have strong opinions about everything, who never admit doubt, who always have an answer. They've confused confidence with competence, and they're usually wrong about most things. Here's what's paradoxical when you embrace uncertainty. When you're willing to say, I don't know, you actually become more effective at navigating the world. Because you're not locked into false certainties. You can adapt, you can update, you can change course when new information comes in. But if you've staked your identity on being right, on being certain, you're stuck. You'll ride your beliefs straight into disaster rather than admit you might be wrong. Feynman told this story about his time in Brazil. He was teaching physics at a university and he noticed something disturbing. The students could recite everything perfectly. They could solve the problems exactly as shown in the textbook. But when he asked them slightly different questions, when he changed the context even a little bit, they couldn't do it. They had memorized patterns, but they hadn't understood the underlying principles. He gave them a problem about a light beam reflecting off a surface at different angles. They aced it. Then he asked them what happens when sound bounces off a wall. They had no idea, even though it's the exact same principle, just applied to sound instead of light. They couldn't transfer the knowledge because they didn't actually understand it. They just knew how to follow a procedure. This is the eighth trap. Average minds learn procedures instead of principles. They learn what to do in specific situations, but they don't understand why. So when the situation changes even slightly, they're lost. They need someone to give them a new procedure, a new set of instructions. Think about your own work. How much of what you do is just following procedures someone taught you? And how much of it do you truly understand at a deep level? Could you explain why you do things the way you do them? Could you adapt those methods to a different context? Or are you just executing programs someone else wrote? The people who escape average thinking learn principles. They learn how things actually work, why they work that way, what the underlying mechanisms are. And once you understand principles, you can apply them anywhere. You don't need someone to give you instructions for every possible situation. You can figure it out yourself. Feynman was a master of this. He could walk into any field, any problem, any situation, and he could figure out what was really going on because he understood fundamental principles. Physics, biology, computer science, whatever. He'd ask basic questions, he'd build up his understanding from scratch, and pretty soon he'd be contributing at a high level even though he was supposedly an outsider. That's the power of thinking in principles instead of procedures. You become adaptable, you become creative, you become genuinely valuable instead of just being a human robot executing instructions. Let me tell you about the ninth trap, and this one is subtle but powerful. Average minds live in narratives instead of reality. They have stories about themselves, stories about how the world works, stories about what's possible and what's not, and they confuse these stories with truth. Feynman was ruthless about cutting through narratives to get to reality. He didn't care about the story. He cared about what was actually happening. When he was investigating the Challenger disaster, NASA had this whole narrative about how safe the shuttle was, how they had redundant systems, how they'd thought of everything. But Feynman looked at the actual data, did actual experiments, and discovered that the narrative was completely divorced from reality. We all live in narratives. You have a narrative about who you are. I'm not good at math. I'm an introvert. I'm not creative. I'm too old to learn new things. These are stories you tell yourself and they feel true, but they're just stories. They're not reality. Reality is that you're a human being with a brain that's capable of learning and adapting and growing. The narrative is something you created or someone else created for you, and you accepted it. Here's what's powerful. Once you realize these are just stories, you can change them. You can write new stories. But most people never realize this. They think their self-concept is the truth. And so they live inside these invisible walls that don't actually exist. I'll give you an example from my own life. For years, I had this narrative that I wasn't athletic. I was the smart kid, not the sports kid. That was my identity. And because of that narrative, I didn't try in gym class. I avoided sports. I told myself I just wasn't built for physical activity. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized this was complete nonsense. There was nothing physically wrong with me. I just had a story in my head that said I wasn't athletic, and I'd made that story real by living according to it. Once I realized it was just a story, I could change it. I started running, started working out, and you know what? Turns out I'm perfectly capable of physical activity. The limitation was never real. It was always just a narrative. How many of your limitations are like this? How many of the things you think you can't do are actually just stories you've been telling yourself for so long that they feel like truth? This is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. The 10th trap, and this builds on all the others, is that average minds optimize for looking good instead of getting better. They care more about appearing smart than actually becoming smarter. They care more about avoiding mistakes than learning from them. They care more about maintaining their image than developing their abilities. Feynman didn't care about looking good. He'd admit when he didn't understand something. He'd ask stupid questions in front of prestigious scientists. He'd make mistakes in public and laugh about them. His ego wasn't tied to appearing perfect. It was tied to understanding reality. This is so important. When you prioritize looking good, you can't take risks. You can't try new things where you might fail. You can't ask questions that might make you look ignorant. You can't experiment and make mistakes. And if you can't do those things, you can't learn. You're stuck. But when you prioritize getting better, suddenly you're free. You can take on challenges that scare you. You can ask all the dumb questions you need to ask. You can fail spectacularly and then learn from it. You can be a beginner again. And that freedom is what allows real growth. I see this all the time in the business world. People get promoted to positions where they don't really know what they're doing. But instead of admitting that and learning, they fake it. They pretend they know. They use jargon and bluster to cover their lack of understanding. And they get away with it for a while, but they never actually develop the competence they need. They're forever just barely staying ahead of being exposed as a fraud. Imagine if instead they just said, I don't know this yet, but I'm going to learn it. Imagine if they asked questions admitted mistakes, and focused on actually getting better, rather than just appearing competent. They'd be so much more effective. They'd learn so much faster. They'd actually become the person they're pretending to be. But that takes courage. It takes humility, and most people would rather maintain their image than develop real capability. Now, let me shift gears and talk about what it means to escape average thinking. Because I've spent a lot of time telling you what's wrong, but what's the solution? How do you actually break free from these traps? The first thing you need to do is cultivate genuine curiosity. Not curiosity about gossip or drama or what people think about you. Curiosity about how things actually work. Curiosity about why things are the way they are. Curiosity about what's really true. Feynman had this childlike curiosity that never went away. He'd see something ordinary, something everyone else ignored, and he'd wonder about it. Why does water swirl when it goes down the drain? Why do mirrors reverse left and right but not up and down? Why does ice float? These seem like simple questions, but when you really dig into them, they open up entire worlds of understanding. Start asking why about everything. When someone tells you something is true, ask why. When something works a certain way, ask why. When there's a rule or a procedure, ask why we do it that way. And don't accept, that's just how it is, or that's what everyone does, as an answer. Keep digging until you understand. This is going to annoy people. People don't like it when you question things. It makes them uncomfortable. They'll say you're overthinking, you're being difficult, you're wasting time. But you know what? Those are the voices of average minds trying to pull you back down into average thinking. Don't listen to them. The second thing you need to do is think from first principles. This is what Elon Musk talks about, and he got it from studying physics, from studying people like Feynman. Instead of reasoning by analogy, instead of doing things the way they've always been done, strip away all the assumptions and start from what you know to be absolutely true. Feynman was a master of this. When he was working on a problem, he wouldn't look at what other people had done. He'd start from scratch. He'd say, what do we know for sure? What are the fundamental laws that apply here? And he'd build up his understanding from that foundation. Let me give you an example. Someone says, cars are expensive to manufacture because they've always been expensive to manufacture. That's reasoning by analogy. First principles thinking says, what is a car? It's a bunch of materials, glass, steel, aluminum, plastic, assembled in a certain way. What do those materials cost? What does it cost to assemble them? Could we use different materials? Could we assemble them differently? Could we rethink the entire concept of what a car is? See the difference. One approach accepts the status quo. The other approach questions everything and builds from fundamentals. And that's how real breakthroughs happen. That's how you escape average thinking. The third thing you need to do is develop intellectual honesty. This means being brutally honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't know. It means admitting when you're wrong. It means updating your beliefs when you get new evidence. It means not lying to yourself. This is hard. Our brains are designed to protect our ego, not to seek truth. We have all these cognitive biases that make us interpret information in ways that confirm what we already believe. We remember the times we were right and forget the times we were wrong. We attribute our successes to skill and our failures to luck. We're walking confirmation bias machines. Feynman fought against this constantly. He had a rule: you must not fool yourself. And you are the easiest person to fool. He was always checking himself, always questioning his own reasoning, always looking for ways he might be wrong. And this made him more right, more often than almost anyone else. You need to develop this same discipline. When you believe something, ask yourself why you believe it. What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Are you believing it because it's true, or because you want it to be true? Are you believing it because you thought about it carefully, or because someone you respect said it? Keep a journal of your predictions. Write down what you think will happen and why. Then check back later and see if you were right. When you're wrong, really dig into why. This is painful, but it's how you calibrate your thinking. The fourth thing you need to do is embrace discomfort and uncertainty. Stop seeking comfort. Stop trying to make everything safe and predictable. Challenge yourself constantly. Put yourself in situations where you don't know what you're doing. Learn new skills. Meet new people. Expose yourself to ideas that make you uncomfortable. Feynman loved discomfort. He loved being confused because confusion meant he was about to learn something. He loved being wrong because being wrong meant he was about to get closer to truth. He loved challenges because challenges forced him to grow. Most people avoid all of this. They stay in their lane, they stick with what they know, they surround themselves with people who agree with them, and they stagnate. They might be successful by conventional measures, they might have money and status and respect, but intellectually and spiritually they're dead. They stopped growing decades ago. Don't let that be you. Seek out things that challenge you. Read books that disagree with your worldview. Learn skills that are completely outside your expertise. Have conversations with people who think differently than you do. Travel to places that are unfamiliar. Make yourself uncomfortable regularly and deliberately. The fifth thing, and this is crucial, is to think for yourself. Don't outsource your thinking to experts, authorities, or popular opinion. Develop your own understanding of things. Form your own opinions based on your own reasoning. Be willing to disagree with everyone if your reasoning leads you to a different conclusion. This doesn't mean you ignore experts. It means you understand their reasoning, you examine their evidence, and you make up your own mind. You don't just accept something because a smart person said it. You think it through yourself. Feynman did this constantly. He'd read papers by famous physicists and find mistakes. He'd attend conferences where everyone agreed on something, and he'd be the one voice saying, "Wait, that doesn't make sense." He wasn't being contrarian for its own sake. He was thinking independently and following the logic wherever it led. You need to develop this independence. Stop asking, "What should I think about this?" and start asking, "What do I think about this?" Stop looking for the right answer and start working out your own answer. Trust your own reasoning, even when it disagrees with consensus. Now, I want to talk about something that might be the most important thing I say today. All of this, everything I've been talking about, comes down to one thing: intellectual courage. That's what separates average minds from exceptional ones. Not intelligence, not talent, not opportunity, courage. It takes courage to question your beliefs. It takes courage to admit you're wrong. It takes courage to ask questions that might make you look stupid. It takes courage to pursue understanding when everyone else is content with comfortable ignorance. It takes courage to think for yourself when everyone else is following the crowd. Feynman had this courage in abundance. He questioned authority. He challenged consensus. He admitted ignorance. He followed his curiosity even when it seemed impractical. And this courage, more than his genius, is what made him extraordinary. You have a choice right now. You can coast. You can think like everyone else, believe what you're told to believe, follow the path that's been laid out for you. It's safe, it's comfortable, and at the end of your life, you'll realize you never really lived. You were just a passenger, going through the motions, never fully awake. Or you can choose courage. You can choose to really think, to really question, to really understand. You can choose to be uncomfortable, to be uncertain, to be wrong sometimes. You can choose to use this incredible gift of consciousness and intelligence that you have. And at the end of your life, whatever else happens, you'll know that you actually lived. You were awake, you were present, you were thinking. Feynman died in 1988, but his warning echoes across the decades. Don't let yourself be fooled. Don't settle for average thinking. Don't waste this miraculous chance you have to understand and experience and create. The prison of average thinking is invisible, but it's real, and most people live their entire lives inside it without ever realizing they're trapped. But you're not most people. You're here, you're listening, and something in you knows there's more. Something in you wants to break free, to think clearly, to see reality as it actually is, not as you've been told it is. Let me tell you one final story. Near the end of his life, Feynman was asked if he had any regrets. He thought about it and said no. He'd followed his curiosity wherever it led. He'd thought deeply about the things that interested him. He'd refused to waste time on things that didn't matter. He'd lived exactly the way he wanted to live, thinking the way he wanted to think, not caring what anyone else thought about it. That's freedom. That's what escaping average thinking gives you. Not just better ideas or more success, though those often follow, but freedom. The freedom to think for yourself. The freedom to see the world clearly. The freedom to live according to your own understanding, not someone else's script. You're going to face enormous pressure to think like everyone else. From your family, your friends, your colleagues, society at large. Everyone has an opinion about how you should think, what you should believe, what you should do. And most of that advice, even when it's well-intentioned, is going to lead you toward average thinking. You have to resist this. You have to protect your ability to think independently like it's the most valuable thing you possess, because it is. Everything else in your life, your career, your relationships, your happiness, your contribution to the world, all of it flows from the quality of your thinking. Here's what I want you to do starting right now, today, this moment. Pick one belief you hold, something you're pretty sure is true, and question it. Really question it. Where did that belief come from? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Are you believing it because you've thought it through, or because it's what you've always believed? Do this every single day. Pick a different belief each time. Question your assumptions. Examine your reasoning. Look for flaws in your own thinking. This is hard. This is uncomfortable. But this is how you escape average thinking. Second thing, commit to learning something completely new this year. Something you know nothing about. Something that's outside your comfort zone. And don't just learn it superficially. Really understand it. Ask why. Dig deep. Connect it to other things you know. Make it part of your worldview. Third thing, find someone who disagrees with you about something important and have a real conversation with them. Not an argument, a conversation. Try to understand why they think what they think. Try to see the world from their perspective. You don't have to agree with them, but you should be able to explain their position in a way they'd agree with. This develops your ability to think from multiple perspectives, which is crucial to escaping your own mental traps. Fourth thing, start a thinking practice. Every day, spend 15 minutes just thinking. Not consuming information, not scrolling, not listening to something. Just thinking about a problem you're facing, about something you're trying to understand, about connections between ideas. Train your mind to work on its own, without constant external input. Fifth thing, embrace saying, I don't know. Make it your default response when you don't actually understand something. Stop pretending. Stop bluffing. Stop nodding along when you're confused. Admit ignorance freely and then do something about it. Ask questions. Do research. Think about it, but start from honest acknowledgement of what you don't know. The average mind sees these things as threats, as challenges to their ego, as uncomfortable work that's easier to avoid. But you're not average, or at least you don't have to be. You can choose differently. Feynman's warning was clear. The person you have to watch out for, the person who's most likely to fool you and keep you trapped in average thinking, is yourself, your own ego, your own need for comfort, your own fear of being wrong, your own desire to fit in. These are the enemies. Not other people, not circumstances, not bad luck. You. And the good news is, because you're the problem, you're also the solution. You can change this. You can develop the habits of mind that lead to exceptional thinking. You can break free from the patterns that keep most people trapped. You can wake up, but you have to choose it. Every single day you have to choose it. Because the default is to slide back into average thinking. It's easier. It's more comfortable. It's what everyone around you is doing. The pull of the crowd is strong. This is why I started by talking about my fear. My fear of reaching the end of my life and realizing I never really thought, I never really questioned, I never really understood. I just accepted and repeated and followed. That terrifies me more than anything else. What terrifies you? What would it mean to reach the end of your life and realize you stayed average? That you had all this potential, all this capacity for understanding and insight and growth, and you just didn't use it. That you chose comfort over truth, ease over growth, fitting and overthinking deeply. I don't want that for you. Feynman wouldn't have wanted that for you. And I don't think you want it for yourself, or you wouldn't have listened this far. You have one life, one chance to use this remarkable mind you have, one opportunity to see clearly, think deeply, understand truly. Don't waste it. Don't settle for average thinking. Don't let yourself be fooled. Break free. Question everything. Think for yourself. Embrace uncertainty. Love being wrong because it means you're about to be right. Chase understanding like your life depends on it, because in the ways that matter most, it does. The prison of average thinking has invisible bars. But once you see them, Once you really understand how you've been limiting yourself, you can never unsee them. And that's both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because you realize how much time you've wasted. Liberating because you realize you can change starting right now. Feynman once said that studying physics, really understanding how the universe works, gave him a different kind of satisfaction than most people ever experience. Not the satisfaction of being comfortable or successful or admired, but the satisfaction of really knowing something, of understanding something deeply, of seeing how things actually work instead of just accepting surface explanations. That satisfaction is available to you in physics, in philosophy, in psychology, in art, in mathematics, in any field where you're willing to think deeply and honestly. But you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to question yourself as ruthlessly as you question anyone else. Are you willing? That's the question, not are you smart enough? Not do you have enough time? Not is it practical? But are you willing to think instead of coast? Are you willing to question instead of accept? Are you willing to be uncomfortable in pursuit of understanding? If your answer is yes, then everything changes. Not immediately, not magically, but inevitably. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your understanding becomes deeper. Your ability to navigate reality becomes stronger. You become more capable, more effective, more alive. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you start thinking clearly, once you escape average thinking, you can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've learned. The clarity is permanent. So make the choice. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when things are less busy. Now, choose to think. Choose to question. Choose to understand. Choose to break free from average thinking and everything that comes with it. Feynman's warning was a gift. He was showing you the bars of your cage. He was giving you permission to question everything, to think for yourself, to pursue understanding without apology. He was saying, you don't have to think like everyone else. You don't have to accept what you're told. You don't have to stay average. And I'm telling you the same thing. You don't have to stay trapped. You can think clearly. You can see reality as it is. You can understand deeply. You can break free, but only if you choose it. Only if you commit to it. Only if you're willing to do what average minds won't do. Question yourself. Embrace uncertainty, admit ignorance, seek truth over comfort, pursue understanding over image. The choice is yours. Average thinking is safe and comfortable and leads to a life of quiet desperation. Exceptional thinking is challenging and uncomfortable and leads to a life of genuine understanding and satisfaction. Which will you choose? Because make no mistake, you are choosing. Every day, with every thought, with every decision to question or accept, to dig deeper or stay shallow, to think or coast. You're choosing what kind of mind you'll have, what kind of life you'll live, what kind of person you'll become. Feynman chose courage. He chose curiosity. He chose understanding. And his life was extraordinary not because he was smarter than everyone else, though he was very smart, but because he thought differently. He refused to be fooled. He refused to settle. He refused to accept average thinking. You can make the same choice, starting right now, starting with the very next thought you have. Will you accept it automatically, or will you examine it? Will you follow the crowd, or will you think for yourself? Will you stay comfortable, or will you seek understanding? The answer to that question determines everything. It determines whether you escape the trap or spend your life caught in it. It determines whether you truly live or just exist. It determines whether you're average or exceptional. And now you know. You've been warned. You've seen the bars of the cage. You understand what keeps average minds average. You know what you need to do to break free. The question is, will you do it? Your life is waiting for your answer. Now let me get even more practical with you, because I don't want this to just be inspiration that fades by tomorrow morning. I want to give you concrete tools you can use to escape average thinking, starting today. Let's talk about the Feynman technique. This is something he developed for learning, and it's devastatingly effective. Here's how it works. Take any concept you want to understand, any topic, any idea. Now try to explain it to a child. I mean literally, as if you're talking to a smart 10-year-old. No jargon, no technical terms unless you can define them simply. Just clear, simple explanation. You'll find something interesting happens. Either you can do it, which means you actually understand it, or you can't, which means you don't understand it as well as you thought. Most people discover they can't. They stumble. They reach for technical terms. They get confused. And that's when real learning begins. When you find the gaps in your understanding, go back to the source material. Study it again. But this time, study it with the specific goal of filling those gaps. Then try to explain it again. Keep doing this until you can explain the concept clearly and simply, without hesitation, without jargon, without confusion. This technique is powerful because it forces you to confront what you actually understand versus what you've just memorized. Average minds memorize. Exceptional minds understand. And understanding means being able to explain something simply. I use this technique all the time. Whenever I read something and think I understand it, I try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about the topic. And about half the time, I discover I didn't understand it as well as I thought. So I go back and learn it properly. This has saved me from countless cases of false confidence, where I thought I knew something but really just knew the words. Let me tell you another Feynman story that illustrates why this matters. He was once talking to a historian about ancient Greek scientists, and the historian was going on and on about how Archimedes had discovered the principle of buoyancy. Feynman stopped him and said, "Can you explain what that principle actually is?" And the historian couldn't. He could talk about when Archimedes discovered it, who he told, how it influenced later thinkers, but he couldn't explain what buoyancy actually was. This is what passes for knowledge in most fields. People know about things without knowing things. They know the history, the context, the terminology, but they don't know the actual substance. And Feynman found this fascinating and frustrating. He couldn't understand why anyone would study something without caring what it actually meant. But that's normal. That's average thinking. People collect facts and stories and names and dates, and they think that makes them educated. But education without understanding is just trivia. It's useless. So here's your challenge. Pick something you think you understand pretty well. Maybe it's something from your field of work. Maybe it's a concept from science or economics or philosophy. Now try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it. Actually do it. Don't just imagine it. Find a friend or family member and explain it to them. See where you get stuck. This is humbling, but humility is essential to learning. Pride, ego, the need to appear smart. These things keep you trapped in average thinking. Humility, the willingness to admit you don't know something. That's what opens the door to real understanding. Now let's talk about another crucial skill, thinking in systems. Average minds think in straight lines. If X happens, then Y will happen. Simple cause and effect. But reality doesn't work like that. Reality is complex systems with feedback loops, unintended consequences, and emergent properties. Feynman understood this deeply. When he was studying physics, he wasn't just looking at individual particles or forces. He was looking at how systems behave as a whole. He understood that sometimes the whole is very different from the sum of its parts. Let me give you an example from everyday life. Someone says, "We should raise the minimum wage because people need more money." Sounds reasonable, right? That's linear thinking. More money equals better life for workers. But system thinking says, wait, what are all the effects of raising the minimum wage? What happens to employment? What happens to prices? What happens to automation? What happens to small businesses versus large corporations? How do these effects feed back into each other? I'm not arguing for or against raising the minimum wage. I'm saying that average minds think about it in simple, linear terms, while better minds think about it as a complex system with multiple interconnected effects. And the ability to think in systems, to see connections and feedback loops and unintended consequences, that's what separates people who make good decisions from people who make disastrous ones. This applies to everything. Your health is a system. Your relationships are a system. Your career is a system. The economy is a system. The environment is a system. And if you try to intervene in a system with simple, linear thinking, you often make things worse, not better. So how do you develop systems thinking? Start by looking for feedback loops. When something happens, it causes other things to happen, which then loop back and affect the original thing. Your stress affects your sleep, which affects your performance, which causes more stress. That's a feedback loop. Once you start seeing these loops, you see them everywhere. Also look for delayed effects. Sometimes an action has immediate consequences and also long-term consequences that are completely different. Eating junk food feels good immediately but makes you feel terrible long-term. Studying feels hard immediately but pays off long-term. Average minds focus on immediate effects. Better minds think about delayed effects. Look for scale effects. Something that works at small scale might break at large scale. A system that's efficient with 10 people might be chaotic with 1,000. Average minds assume everything scales linearly. Better minds understand that scale changes everything. Feynman was brilliant at this kind of thinking. When he was working on the atomic bomb, he wasn't just thinking about the physics of the explosion. He was thinking about the entire system. How the uranium would be purified, how the parts would be manufactured, how the bomb would be delivered, what effects it would have, what it would mean for the future. Systems thinking, and this system thinking made him invaluable because he could see problems that specialized experts missed. The experts were looking at their piece of the puzzle. Feynman was looking at how all the pieces fit together. You need to develop this ability. Stop thinking in straight lines and start thinking in webs of causation. Stop looking at individual events and start looking at patterns. Stop focusing on one variable and start seeing the whole system. Here's a practical exercise. Take any problem you're facing right now. Write it down. Now list all the factors that contribute to that problem. For each factor, list what causes that factor. For each cause, list what causes that cause. Keep going until you've mapped out a web of interconnected causes. Now look at that web and you'll start to see the system. You'll start to see leverage points where small changes could have big effects. You'll start to see feedback loops that amplify or dampen effects. You'll start to think like Feynman. Let me shift to another crucial concept: mental models. Average minds have a few mental models they apply to everything. Better minds have a large toolkit of mental models and know which one to use in which situation. What's a mental model? It's a way of understanding how something works. It's a framework for thinking about a particular type of problem. For example, supply and demand is a mental model from economics. Natural selection is a mental model from biology. Compound interest is a mental model from finance. Feynman had an enormous number of mental models because he studied many different fields. He could think about a problem using physics, using mathematics, using psychology, using engineering, and often applying a mental model from a different field would give him insights that specialists missed. Charlie Munger talks about this too. He calls it a latticework of mental models. The idea is that if you only have one way of thinking about problems, you'll try to use that one way for everything. The old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But if you have many different tools, many different ways of thinking, you can choose the right tool for each problem. So how do you build your collection of mental models? Study different fields. Read widely. Don't just go deep in your specialty, go broad across many domains. Learn the big ideas from physics, from biology, from psychology, from economics, from history, from philosophy. You don't need to become an expert in everything. You just need to understand the key concepts well enough to apply them. When Feynman was learning something new, he'd always try to connect it to things he already knew. He'd ask, what does this remind me of? What principles from other fields apply here? How is this similar to or different from other systems I understand? This cross-pollination of ideas is where creativity and insight come from. Average minds stay in their lane. They become narrow specialists who know a lot about a little. And there's value in that, don't get me wrong. But the people who make real breakthroughs, who see connections others miss, who solve problems in novel ways, those people usually have broad knowledge across multiple domains. So read outside your field. Take courses in subjects that have nothing to do with your work. Talk to people who do completely different things than you do. Build your toolkit of mental models, and then practice applying them. When you face a problem, ask yourself what mental models might be useful here. What frameworks from different fields could give me insight? Let me give you a specific example. I once had a problem with team dynamics at work. People weren't communicating well. Projects were getting stuck. There was tension. My first instinct was to think about it as a management problem. Better processes, clearer roles, more meetings. But then I thought about it using a mental model from systems theory, requisite variety. The idea is that a system needs internal variety to match the variety in its environment. Applied to my team problem. This meant that maybe we needed more diverse communication styles, more flexibility in how we worked, more options for how people could interact. So instead of imposing more structure, we created more variety. Different ways to communicate, different types of meetings, different ways to collaborate. And it worked. Problem solved. Would I have found that solution thinking purely in management terms? Maybe not. But because I had mental models from different fields, I could approach the problem from different angles and find a solution that wasn't obvious from just one perspective. This is the power of mental models. They give you more ways to think about problems. And the more ways you can think about a problem, the more likely you are to find a good solution. Now, let me talk about something that might be uncomfortable: your environment. Average minds underestimate how much their environment shapes their thinking. They think they're independent thinkers, but really they're products of their environment. The people they spend time with, the media they consume, the conversations they have, all of this shapes their thinking in ways they don't even realize. Feynman was very conscious of this. He was careful about who he spent time with. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him, who thought differently, who weren't afraid to tell him when he was wrong. He avoided people who just agreed with everything he said, who treated him like an authority figure, who wanted to bask in his reflected glory. He also was very selective about what he paid attention to. He didn't watch much TV. He didn't follow celebrity gossip. He didn't spend time on things that didn't interest him or challenge him intellectually. He protected his mental environment the way a gardener protects a garden, carefully cultivating what should grow and pulling out weeds. You need to do the same thing. Look at your environment. Who are you spending time with? Are they challenging you to think better, or are they reinforcing your existing patterns? Are they curious and thoughtful, or are they cynical and closed-minded? Are they growing, or are they stuck? This doesn't mean you should abandon old friends or only hang out with smart people. It means you should be intentional about who influences your thinking. If everyone around you thinks the same way, believes the same things, values the same things, you're in an echo chamber. And echo chambers breed average thinking. Seek out people who disagree with you, not people who are just argumentative or contrarian, but people who have genuinely different perspectives based on different experiences and different ways of thinking. Have real conversations with them. Try to understand why they see things differently. This stretches your mind in ways that agreeing with people never will. Also, look at what you're consuming. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Is it challenging you, or is it just confirming what you already believe? Is it making you think, or is it just entertaining you? Is it adding to your understanding, or is it just filling time? Average minds consume passively. They let algorithms feed them content. They watch whatever is popular. They read whatever everyone else is reading. And their thinking becomes a reflection of whatever the algorithm or the crowd decides to show them. Better minds are intentional. They choose what they consume based on what they want to learn, what they want to understand, what challenges they want to take on. They read primary sources instead of just summaries. They seek out perspectives that challenge them. They prioritize depth over breadth. Feynman read original scientific papers, not just textbooks. He learned languages so he could read works in their original form. He talked to experts directly instead of just reading about what they said. He went to the source. And this gave him a depth of understanding that most people never achieve. You can do this too. Want to understand economics? Don't just read news articles about the economy. Read actual economics papers. Read books by economists from different schools of thought. Look at actual data. Form your own understanding based on primary sources, not secondhand interpretations. This takes more effort. It's harder, but that's the point. Average minds take the easy path, consuming predigested information. Better minds do the work of understanding things directly. Let me tell you about another trap that catches people: the illusion of knowledge. This is when you know about something but mistake that for actually knowing something. You've read articles about quantum mechanics, so you feel like you understand quantum mechanics. You've heard people talk about blockchain, so you feel like you understand blockchain. But you don't. You just have a surface familiarity that feels like understanding. Feynman encountered this all the time. People would use fancy words and act like they understood things. But when he asked them to explain it simply, they couldn't. They had the vocabulary but not the understanding. And he was ruthless about calling this out, not to embarrass people, but because he genuinely believed that clarity of thought mattered. The antidote to the illusion of knowledge is to test your understanding. Try to explain it. Try to use it. Try to predict what will happen based on it. If you really understand something, you can do these things. If you can't, you don't understand it. You just know about it. This is humbling. You'll discover that you understand far less than you thought you did. But that's good. That's the starting point for real learning. You can't learn what you think you already know. Admitting ignorance is the first step to gaining knowledge. Here's a challenge I want you to take. Make a list of 10 things you think you understand pretty well. For each one, try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it. Actually do this. Don't just imagine it. You'll probably find that you can only truly explain 2 or 3 of them. The rest, you just have surface familiarity with. For the ones you couldn't explain well, decide, do you actually need to understand this, or is surface familiarity enough? For the things you actually need to understand, commit to learning them properly. Use the Feynman technique. Go to primary sources. Build real understanding, not just vocabulary. This process of testing and improving your understanding, this is how you escape average thinking. Average minds are satisfied with surface knowledge. Better minds insist on deep understanding. And deep understanding gives you power. Power to make better decisions, solve harder problems, and see opportunities others miss. Let me talk about one more critical skill, the ability to hold opposing ideas in your mind simultaneously. Scott Fitzgerald said that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Feynman exemplified this. He could see multiple sides of an issue. He could understand different perspectives. He could acknowledge uncertainty and ambiguity without needing to resolve it immediately. This made him incredibly effective at solving complex problems because he wasn't locked into one way of seeing things. Average minds need resolution. They need clear answers. They need to know who's right and who's wrong. They're uncomfortable with ambiguity, so they rush to judgment. They pick a side and then defend it, even when the evidence is mixed, even when the issue is genuinely complex. Better minds can sit with ambiguity. They can say, I see merit in both arguments. I don't know yet which is more correct. Let me gather more information and think about this more deeply. They don't need to have an opinion about everything immediately. This is incredibly valuable in our current world, where everyone is expected to have immediate, strong opinions about everything. Average minds rush to judgment because that's what's expected. Better minds take their time, think carefully, and accept that some questions don't have easy answers. Practice this. When you encounter a controversial issue, instead of immediately picking a side, try to understand both sides as deeply as you can. Try to make the best case for each position. Try to see why reasonable, intelligent people might disagree. This doesn't mean you can't ever take a position. It means you take positions thoughtfully, based on careful consideration, not on tribal loyalty or the need to appear decisive. Feynman did this constantly. In scientific disputes, he'd often say things like, Theory A has these strengths and these weaknesses. Theory B has these strengths and these weaknesses. Based on current evidence, I lean toward A, but I could be wrong, and I'm interested to see how the evidence develops. No dogmatism, no certainty, just careful, considered thinking. This kind of intellectual humility is rare. Most people, once they've announced a position, defend it to the death. Their ego gets involved. They've identified with their position, and to change it would feel like admitting they're wrong, which they can't do. So they rationalize, they find confirming evidence, they discount contradicting evidence, they dig in. But Feynman changed his mind freely. When better evidence came along, he updated his views. He had no ego investment in being right about any particular thing. He had ego investment in getting to the truth, which meant being wrong sometimes was not just acceptable but necessary. You need to develop this same approach. See your beliefs as provisional, as hypotheses to be tested, not as core parts of your identity. When you're wrong, be excited. You're about to learn something. When someone proves you wrong, thank them. They've just helped you get closer to truth. This mindset, more than anything else, is what allows you to escape average thinking. Because average thinking is defensive. It protects existing beliefs. It resists change. It needs to be right. But exceptional thinking is exploratory. It seeks truth wherever that leads. It welcomes being wrong because being wrong is how you learn. Your life right now is the result of your thinking up to this point. If you want a different life, you need different thinking. If you want to solve problems you haven't been able to solve, you need to think in ways you haven't been thinking. If you want to understand things you don't currently understand, you need to approach them differently than you have been. This isn't motivational fluff. This is practical reality. Your thinking creates your reality, not in some mystical law of attraction sense, but in the very real sense that the quality of your decisions, the depth of your understanding, the effectiveness of your actions, all of this flows from the quality of your thinking, and the quality of your thinking is not fixed. It's not determined by your IQ or your education or your background. It's determined by your habits of mind, and habits can be changed. You can learn to think more clearly, more deeply, more effectively. But you have to choose to. You have to put in the work. Feynman wasn't born thinking clearly. He developed that ability through practice, through discipline, through constantly questioning himself and checking his reasoning and being willing to be wrong. He made it look easy because he'd practiced it for so long that it became automatic. But it started with a choice, the same choice I'm asking you to make right now. Choose to think, choose to question, choose to understand, choose depth over surface, choose truth over comfort, choose growth over stagnation, choose to escape average thinking and everything that comes with it. This is not a one-time decision. This is a daily practice, a constant vigilance, a continual effort, because the pull of average thinking is strong. It's comfortable, it's familiar, it's what everyone around you is doing. You'll be tempted to slide back into it every single day. You have to choose again and again to think clearly, to question honestly, to seek understanding relentlessly. But if you do this, if you commit to this, your life will transform, not overnight, but steadily, inevitably. You'll see more clearly. You'll understand more deeply. You'll make better decisions. You'll solve harder problems. You'll contribute more. You'll be more fully alive. And at the end of your life, you'll look back without regret. You'll know that you really lived, that you really thought, that you really used this gift of consciousness and intelligence that you were given. You won't wonder what you could have been. You'll know what you became. That's what's at stake. That's what this choice is really about. Not just thinking better, though that's important, but living fully, experiencing deeply, understanding truly, being awake instead of sleepwalking through life, being present instead of going through the motions, being real instead of playing a role. Feynman's warning echoes, don't fool yourself. You are the easiest person to fool. But now you know the traps, you know the way out, you know what you need to do. The only question left is, will you do it? Your life is waiting for your answer.